In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. Well, first of all, we celebrate the feast day of St. Demetrius, the great martyr. And it's always a joy for me on this day to wear this set of vestments, because these vestments were given to me by Bishop Demetrius, and these were his ordination vestments. So they have, this was added later, of course, me with my icons on my epigonatia, right? Wouldn't be Father Peter without an icon in there. So I have St. Demetrius. You see him riding a red horse on this particular icon. Over here, you see him holding the shield. It's him standing the full figure, him standing there holding the shield, which is a rare depiction of him, because usually he's on a red horse. So if you've ever been confused of who's on the white horse, who's on the red horse, well, the white horse in the back corner on the upper level is St. George. They're kind of from the same vintage of time, but little different areas. But you'll know, if you don't learn anything else today, that St. George is on a white horse, St. Demetrius is on a red horse. So if you have an icon at home and you're wondering who it is, just look at the color of the horse. And many of the miracles that have been wrought by St. Demetrius and St. George, and one of them was actually written down when I had asked you a few weeks ago to write down some of your miracles that have happened to you, so that we can have them for a special presentation, anonymously, of course. But some of you had written about encountering a saint who was on a white horse. But it gets a little more complicated with the white horse, because St. Minas and St. Eustathios also have white horses. St. Eustathios is in the back corner over there, and St. Minas is right next to him, but he's not on his horse, but St. Minas was also depicted on a white horse. But today we're going to talk about St. Demetrius on the red horse. Now, it was kind of funny, as I had asked one of the altar boys to go to my office to get this book, and as soon as Father Chris saw this book, he started laughing, and he's like, oh, because this was our Byzantine history book. It's almost 700 pages, and the print, I can't even read it anymore with my eyes the way they are. This book kind of goes through the history of the Byzantine state. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it to you today. But I wanted to condense in a few moments the Byzantine history, and to give you a little historical context of the time of St. Demetrius, also the time of St. George, and also the uprising of, or the coming up, if you will, of St. Constantine the Great. So you have Maximian and Diocletian, okay? They're in two different areas of the Roman Empire. Now we know from the Roman Empire, from the time of Christ and even before Christ, that there was always a Caesar, right? We hear about Nero, we hear about the killing of the children, we hear that, and that's always from the emperor, right? The Caesar, Augustus, we've heard that name before. Anyone who's watched Gladiator with Russell Crowe has heard about the Roman kind of army and the battling, the gladiators. That whole era of fighting came from that time. But if we look at the Maximian and Diocletian, were the two chief persecutors of Christians probably in the history of the church. They were eradicating Christians. It wasn't just hatred towards religion, but it was a hatred towards many things. They wanted absolute power. They wanted to control the area. They wanted to control the people, and they really wanted people to praise the pagan gods, but also to respect the authority that they had. So you had these two in different areas, Maximian and Diocletian. Now Diocletian, if you look at St. Alexandra, who's over there, right next to St. Constantine, I believe. St. Constantine is on the bottom row. All right, I'm going to walk over here so that I lost my pointer yet again. That's what they call peripatetics. This is St. Alexandra right here. This is St. Constantine right here. St. Alexandra was actually the queen and the wife of Diocletian, who was persecuting Christians. Now, Diocletian was the one who persecuted St. George, the great martyr, the one on the white horse, the one here on the far left of the icon screen. And Maximian was the one who went after St. Demetrius. So you have these two heads of the Roman Empire. They're both going crazily after Christians. Now, what I wanted to talk about was a little bit about what Maximian was doing at the time. As history writes, if you've ever seen a statue of him, which you can see if you go online, a statue of him, of Maximian, he's just a kind of a beastly-looking person. But he was, as the fathers of the church say, a bloodthirsty person. He was very much into the arenas of gladiators. He was very much into fighting and sacrificing Christians if they didn't convert to worship the idols. So he sets up this giant Colosseum. Now we know of the Roman Colosseums, right? Now the Roman Colosseum, when you go there, if you've ever been to Rome, and you see the Colosseum, you say, oh wow, look at this structure. And then if you really, really go in the recesses of your history and go into that purple book or read about history, you read about what was happening in the Colosseums, and it's a whole different realm of saying, wow, this is cool, and this is where they rode chariots. That's a lot of Christians were killed in those arenas. Now Maximian had a friend called Laius, L-Y-A-E-U-S, common spelling, right? So Laius was a large man. He was very strong, he was very large, and he was undefeated in the gladiator rings. And Maximian would go and watch him and get excited watching him kill other people. Now, everyone who was a pagan at the time didn't want to go up against this Laius, right? So what they would do is Maximian would say, I want to see him kill somebody today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go imprison some Christians. If they don't convert, we'll imprison them, and then we'll take them and we'll put them in the ring with Laius and see what happens. So he was taking Christians, imprisoning them, and then throwing them out to Laius. And the way this Colosseum was set up was there was a ground like this, and then there was a pit. And inside the pit were spikes that came up in the pit. So when Laius would stab somebody or whatever he would do with his sword, he would pick them up and throw them in the pit on top of the spikes, and these giant spikes would go right through the person. It's disgusting. And then the people would cheer, yay, this is great, because they were sick, right? So Laius was undefeated, and Maximian would back him and be a supporter of him. But what happened was there was this person who was under St. Demetrius, who St. Demetrius made no bones about following Christ. He said, I'm going to follow Christ. And he was put by Maximian in charge of the army. And then Maximian comes by and he says, I hear that you're preaching about Christ. You come worship the pagans and I'll leave you alone. He said, no, absolutely not. You're deceived. You're wrong. I'm a Christian. So Maximian threw him in jail. Now, probably he didn't kill him right away because he was probably worried about an uprising in the army because Demetrius was such a great soldier and so many people respected him. So he threw him in jail, said, let me keep you in jail. But at the time, there was this other person who was kind of a regular build, if you want to call it that, man, named Nestor. And Nestor was a friend of St. Demetrius, and he also converted to Christianity when Demetrius started talking to him about God. So Nestor says, you know what, I can't handle the fact that they're pulling innocent people off the street and throwing them in the ring with Laius, and Laius is killing Christians because they're Christian. He said, bless me, Demetrius. Bless me so that I can go fight this man and stop this. So St. Demetrius makes the sign of the cross on his chest and on his forehead, blesses him, and says, go against Laius. So this Nestor goes out against this giant man, and he stabs him straight in the heart, and then throws him into the pit where the other Christians were thrown. So what happened? The people started yelling in the Colosseum, great is the God of Nestor and of Demetrius, because they knew that he was a Christian. They said, great is his God, not the pagan God that Laius was following, but now the God of Demetrius, they said. So what happens is Maximian is infuriated. His number one prize fighter is dead. And now there's no one to go up against the Christians to completely destroy them. So what does he do? He goes out, he sends a guard out, a many people out to the field. They go grab Nestor and they kill him with his own sword. Then they go inside the jail where St. Demetrius was, and St. Demetrius was told to be brave by an angel. And it said, do not be afraid. Be brave in Christ and you're going to be okay. Now, who always says that? Do not be afraid, right? Archangel Gabriel is the one that always comes, do not be afraid, right? To the shepherds and to the Virgin Mary, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. That's kind of the calling card of Archangel Gabriel. He comes to him and says, don't be afraid, follow Christ, be patient, and this is what's going to happen. So they come into the prison where St. Demetrius is, and they spear him to death inside the prison. Now, one of the things that St. Demetrius had said to Nestor was, you will defeat Laius, but you will suffer for that defeat. So he knew when he was going to defeat Laius that he would suffer and he would be martyred at that point. But what I wanted to take from this, now you get an idea of the brutality of the Roman Empire. Then you have someone like Constantine who comes up through the ranks. He comes up, and he's actually kind of related distantly to Maximian. He comes up through the ranks, he comes in, and then what happens? Maximian and Diocletian kind of fall, they abnegate their throne, they install the newest generation after them, and they kind of step back. Then Constantine comes up, and Constantine starts to have a sympathy towards the Christians. He's not, his mother, obviously, is St. Helen on the cross right there. St. Helen was a pious woman, and that piety rubbed off. So as a reassurance to those who have kids, if you're pious, it rubs off, right? And if you got bad language, that's going to rub off too. So the piety of St. Helen rubs off on Constantine. He comes into the empire, and then what happens? They start to persecute him, and they start to try and kill him. In fact, he had an attempted murder on Constantine when he was in his bed. And Constantine wakes up from this and he says, what's going on now? They're trying to come after me. So Constantine has the vision of the hero, this right here, and in the sky, which is the first two initials of Christ in Greek. He sees the hero, he puts it on his shields, and he goes out and defeats the east and the west, and he says, now I am the sole emperor. And that's how the Byzantine Empire comes from two, Diocletian and Maximian, into really the one of St. Constantine. And St. Constantine ruled for a little over 30 years, but what he did was he came up with this thing called the Edict of Milan, which was allowing the Christian church to be the official church of the empire. No longer was it the pagan gods. No longer were Christians being persecuted, but Constantine takes that, he wipes out, really, family members and armies in the name of establishing the church, which is a shift from what we see in the early church, too. We see all these martyrs, and we still see martyrs in even contemporary times, but we see the martyrs, and then we see Constantine come in, and Constantine's like, I'm not having any of this. I am going out, and I'm going to stop Maximian's group, I'm going to stop Diocletian's group, I'm going to stop Maximinius and Licinius and all these different people all over the place, and he just goes out and just stops them. And that's it. And then we see that St. Constantine has that title of God-crowned ruler and equal to the apostles because he did this. Now, why am I bringing this up for history? It's because it's confusing. At least it was for me. I remember reading that book, and even Father Chris echoed. I remember being in the seminary. I had 19 and a half credit hours, and I worked a little over 20 hours a week. So if I had an evening class in Byzantine history, I saw at least two professors at the same time as my eyes were crossing different ways, and sometimes I thought someone turned out the lights in the room, and I was trying to really focus on Byzantine history, and it can get dry. So the point of what I'm saying today is that things were very much divided, and under Constantine they come to be, that the empire comes to one and becomes this great Christian empire. But in thinking of St. Demetrius today and his greatness in the church, we also look towards that he is the patron saint of Thessaloniki, Greece, or Thessalonica. When he died, myrrh was flowing from his body. So he's a myrrh flower too. Now, what is myrrh? It's like a scented oil, and it's been known to heal too. Now, one of the things too with St. Nilos over here, St. Nilos was of Athos, and the reason these rocks have holes in them is because he was in a rock, and myrrh was flowing down the edge of the rock, and sailors who came were touching it, wondering what it was as they came to the shore, and they touched the myrrh, and one of the people who touched the myrrh who was sick was healed. The same thing with St. Demetrius. He is one of those saints who heals by his body. Now his relics are his body, his bones are at the church and named after him in Thessaloniki. Now if anybody's been to Thessaloniki, it's a gorgeous layout of how the church is. The church is kind of up at the center of a turnaround, and it's kind of the jewel of Thessaloniki in my mind from being there. And I remember too going into the church. It's a very busy church. But one of the things that happened was Justinian, who was later, he was an emperor that was later, probably a couple hundred years after St. Constantine, went to Thessaloniki, and he said, you know what, I want to take his relics to Constantinople. So what happened was he went to go take the relics, and he heard a voice that said, stop and leave it alone. And he saw like a flame of fire around his relics, and he knew that the relics should stay in Thessaloniki, and that's where his relics are today. So today we celebrate St. Demetrius, which many people are named Demetrios and Dimitri, but also tomorrow is the feast day of St. Nestor, and as the church so wisely does throughout the centuries, has put two saints together, right? We have St. Anthony and St. Athanasius who knew each other. St. Athanasius writes the life of St. Anthony. St. Anthony's on January 17th, St. Athanasius on the 18th. Today we have St. Demetrius on the 26th, and St. Nestor, the martyr, on the 27th. So I hope this gives you a little bit of insight of the times of when some of the saints were and who was really persecuting the Christians in the early days, and also a different understanding of who St. Constantine is, too. St. Constantine, to me, when I think of St. Constantine, it was all business. He was an all-business saint. It was no games. You did not mess around with St. Constantine. And I can't imagine, and even when you see his statues, I mean, we have the icons, which show the inner spiritual beauty, but when you see St. Constantine in a statue, and I encourage you to go look it up, he looks solid. I mean, he looks like a solid emperor, and he was. He was a soldier. He was in battle with his soldiers out there really defending and standing up for the freedom of Christianity in the early church. So may the prayers of St. Demetrius, St. Nestor, St. George, St. Alexandra, St. Constantine, St. Helen, may they all be with us this day and always. Amen.